Hi, welcome today. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel, turned abuse recovery coach to try to help you be free from toxic relationships. And on Sundays, a lot of times the video is a little bit different because we're talking through different aspects, sometimes spirituality, sometimes healing, but it might have a different piece. You can see my dog sleeping in the background there. One of the ones I wanted to bring up today was father wounds. And father wounds are really interesting because I correlate this a lot with spirituality and with parenting and with all different types of healing. And what I mean inside of the piece of father wounds and us talking through what it actually looks like is when you have a relationship with your earthly father, it starts to correspond to your heavenly father and how you view that person. And so I was reading inside of a book the other day, and one of the things that came up was this piece of fear. And one of this piece that came up was this idea of love and unconditional love. And it's really the aspect that we have no clue what unconditional love actually looks like or what unconditional love actually seems like. Because in our own lives, our parents didn't show that, didn't have that for us. Now, my parents were great, and they're fantastic parents and love them for everything that they did and everything they tried to help me with. But there's still a place for every single person that there becomes conditions. You might have seen this where you get frustrated with your kids. You're like, if you don't do this, then I'm not doing this. Like whatever it might be, like ultimatums, different pieces where we're trying to establish authority or respect or whatever it might be. There's ultimately this piece where fear comes in and kind of takes over. Like it kind of makes it seem like, well, I have to do this or I have to respond this way to make sure that I don't feel this way or don't do this. Helicopter right over top. So it's really interesting because you'll have different wounds that will come from your parents, different wounds from how they've shown up. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be that your parents were mean or abusive or assholes, right? It could just mean that like your parents were going through stuff and getting triggered or frustrated, or they had a hard day and they said something and how it impacted, how it like hurt you had massive effects. So we see a lot of times like people that come into our program, specifically like women who have been in toxic relationships, and they start to realize that part of what they're doing is not just healing out of the toxic relationship, but they're also healing deeper wounds. They're healing wounds from their dad, from their mom, from other people in their life that have hurt them long term. And so I've seen this in my own life, and I've seen this inside of my parenting and all this kind of stuff, that the stuff that I do is going to have a massive impact on my kids. How I'm showing up, how I'm communicating, how I'm interacting is all going to have a massive impact. And it really boils down to two aspects that I want to talk about. One aspect is fear. One aspect is love. When you start to boil down a lot of the emotions, a lot of the pieces of life, it starts to boil down into two main emotions: fear or love. Now, sometimes it's a piece of fear, like there's a piece there that's like, okay, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. I'm afraid of the outcome. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of all these things. And oftentimes fear is layered and hidden under things. Rage, anger, frustrations, insecurities, all of these are different like fear-based things. So my wife was asking me the other day, because we were talking about this, she was like, well, what about like anger or like when you're getting like frustrated with our daughters? And I was like, yeah, that's all fear. And she's like, how so? And I was talking through like, okay, well, it could be a piece of like respect. Like I'm afraid that they're not going to respect me or they don't respect me in the moment. So I'm like, I have to establish dominance or something like that so that I feel better about myself. I was like, it could be pieces where like they're experiencing emotions that I don't want to deal with, that I feel inconvenienced. There's like a fear of having to deal with them because it's inconveniencing me or my life or things like that. And so it was really just driving home this piece of like, hey, fear and love are kind of like the polar opposites of emotions in life. And oftentimes when we get to these places of having different wounds from family members, from different people, it's a moment where that person was operating with a sponsoring thought of fear, like the underlying piece. So this is why I say that everybody's going to have this, and everybody's going to have different moments where they operate out of fear, where they respond out of fear, where they do something that is like fear-based. And as a result, it produces a wound. It produces a wound for other people of how they're acting, how they're responding, like things that are happening. It produces something there inside. So the piece that correlates here is when you have a wound from a parent, oftentimes you'll start to cascade that into other relationships, and you'll start to cascade that into the spiritual side. So like if you have a parent that is angry a lot, then your automatic thought of a version of God is going to fall into an angry frame. If your parents were extremely loving, then you might fall into a loving God or even of a permissive God. So like there's multiple ways that this will affect, but like when it comes into a place of dealing with father wounds, oftentimes what you'll see is how you've been treated, how you've been interacting, how you've been brought up, oftentimes will affect future, oftentimes will affect spiritual. So I want you to consider in your life, where do you actually see the correlation here today? Where do you see correlation from your parents and how they communicated, how they walked through stuff versus like how that's affecting you today? Oftentimes we'll find that women that come into the program, they heal the toxic relationship, but then they realize I'm actually here to heal more than just that. I'm here to be able to heal like the past trauma of how things have shown up, the past aspects of things that I'm been dealing with, the past things of like, hey, my parents did this and I didn't realize how much it actually hurt me, and my parents ignored me in this area and I didn't realize how much it actually affected me. So many times we'll have people that will come in and they'll start to just open up and they start to realize there's more stuff here that I need to work on, that I need to develop, that I need to see. And so I want you to consider inside of your life, like what else is underneath the surface that we haven't talked about, that we haven't seen, that you haven't shown yet. There might be different aspects that still is there that are different wounds that come from your father or your mother. Now, when you have those, consider that that will start to shift and change your frame of reality, what you view and what you think. So like when you view having a mom or a dad the way that you grow up, oftentimes you will cascade that into the relationship that you go into. Many people have said, sometimes flippantly, but it actually is very true oftentimes, that oftentimes you will marry either your mom or your dad. Like that version of them, oftentimes the one that caused the most trauma will be the one that you actually marry. And we see this all the time in toxic relationships. Someone will get in there and be like, oh yeah, he's just like my dad. Like I didn't realize that in the moment, but he's actually just like my dad. He has the same aspects, he talks the same, he acts the same, he treats me the same. Like I just feel like nothing because of X, Y, and Z. And so you're gonna see different aspects of how you were raised affects massively who you're with and your perspective of God. This has been a piece that has been hugely convicting for me. Because when I show up, I don't always show up unconditional love, which is what God has. There's oftentimes conditions to my love. Well, you have to clean your room first, or you have to do this, or whatever it might be. No, it's different than discipline. I'm just talking about like this aspect of fear and love. But oftentimes there'll be pieces where I will spike up out of anger or frustration because I don't want to deal with whatever's happening in the moment because it makes me afraid. It makes me worried. It makes me feel disrespected. All these different types of things, the fear piece takes over. And then all of a sudden I'm acting out of a place of fear, not a place of love. So this piece of the father wounds is very deep, and we could probably talk about this forever. And I feel like I'm a little lost in it because I feel like there's so many aspects we could talk about it. But I want you to consider right now, when you think of your parents, when you think of your father, how has your relationship with him, how has it affected your view of God? Like how has it shifted of how you actually think about God, how you actually think of the spiritual, of the divine? Does it shift? What actually comes up? When you think about how your dad loved you or how your dad treated you, how does it actually connect to God? Because what you'll see is it'll be the same. Maybe not exact. I'm not saying it's going to be a carbon copy, but you'll have different attributes that you learned from your parents. Oftentimes the parents teach subconsciously that you're not enough, that you're not good enough, that you could have done a little bit better. And while sometimes that's just the parents trying to be able to help you grow and change and develop you, be able to learn you, sometimes it also brings out this piece that you're not good enough, which is absolutely not true. But it's really, really hard for us to step into a place where you feel worthy and good enough, valued, beautiful, great, magnificent. Like all these things, sometimes they feel weird. One of the things I'll have clients do sometimes is I'll have them sit down and write like a thank you note to themselves or do a gratitude stack on themselves. And it feels super weird for people because they have never had that time or attention focused on them. It's always like, how do I make sure everybody else's needs are met? Or how do I make sure everybody else doesn't get mad at me or doesn't get frustrated or that person doesn't do this, whatever it might be. But being able to actually look at themselves and be like, I'm thankful for who I am, for who God's actually created, can be a massive shift for a lot of people. Because gratitude brings out a whole different version of you. It's really amazing. So, part of today was just trying to talk through this piece of the father wounds. Just talking through like what it actually looks like, what it actually feels like, and this piece of how they will cascade to your relationships and to your spiritual walk with God. How they will look or feel or seem different, depending on how you actually view that person. So I know that there's things that I need to work on because I'll have moments where I'll get frustrated. I'll raise my voice at my daughter. And it's not out of a place of love because it's not actually helping her. But it's a place of saying, okay, I need to actually see these things. I need to work on them. Because if I don't work on them, then all that's going to do is influence her view of another relationship and influence her view of God. So this is really key for you to be able to think through in your relationship right now. What precedent are you setting for your kids about their future partner or about God? You will do this by how you interact, how you respond, how you hold space, how you engage with their emotions, how you help them work through and deal with different things. But once you start seeing that, like, when you show up better, when you show up invested in you and developing you to hold space for another person, you can actually do it. After you do it for you, you can do it for others. So this piece oftentimes of like unconditional love has to start with you. You have to learn how to love yourself, how to connect with you. Because otherwise it's easy to keep pushing it off. Well, I love my kids. I'll do this. I'll focus on this. I'll focus on this. And you don't actually take care of you. And as a result, you just pour from an empty cup. You might have heard that before in some of my stuff. We're not going to dive into that now. All these pieces are very, very key of how you're actually moving forward in your life. If you feel stuck in your life right now and you want help, just please go to rawmotivations.com. I'd love to be able to help you move forward, whether it's breaking out of a toxic relationship, whether it's finding your purpose, whether it's helping you move forward with like vision and values of who you actually are and who you're called to be. I'd love to help you with that. So go to rawmotivations.com and we'll see you all next time.